Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers. You're here for season 4 of Wrestling at Random. And it's something that happens every once in a while on this podcast where we will do a show in one season. And then seasons later, or maybe in the bonus feed, the randomizer will pick something that is directly related to that show that we previously watched. That is certainly the case on this week's episode, as we have an episode of Monday Night Raw from 1997 that is the go-home show for the Canadian Stampede in Your House pay-per-view, which we reviewed all the way back in season 1, episode 11 of this very podcast.
Season 1, episode 11, Canadian Stampede, was a pay-per-view that I had not watched, so we reviewed it here as part of, season 1 theme was the randomizer picking pay-per-views, and so it picked that one for us to watch, and holy cow, that held up incredibly well. That the talk was the heat and the crowd and the amazing Canadian fans in Calgary that night, and it delivered on every aspect of that. So if you have not listened to our recap of the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view, Season 1, Episode 11. It's in your free feed right now. It's free. It's in your back catalog. You just scroll on down, find that episode, play it right now in the podcatcher that you're listening to this show in right now. You can listen to us talk about that incredible show.
Not right now. Let's have them listen to this.
Listen to the Go Home Show. Yeah, you get to do it in chronological order. We did it backward. We have the Go Home Show here in season 4. This is WWF's Monday Night Raw. And this is June 30th, 1997, season 5, episode 26, if you're watching on the cock. And we've done the history of Monday Night Raw. You can go back. We've reviewed like three Raws on this podcast at this point.
Plus, we've also reviewed a couple of episodes of Primetime Wrestling where we got into the history of this time slot for the WWF on USA Network preceding Monday Night Raw.
So while you're digging around the back catalog, go ahead and listen to any of those to get the history of Raw, as we love to talk about the histories of the time slots, the shows, and the things we're going to talk about. Here, there was too much going on in the weeks leading up to this episode of Raw. So I have to catch you up on what's going on here, because the card was changing a lot, and a lot of the things they were pushing on the Go Home Show was not what was being pushed just weeks ahead of this television show. So June 30th, 1997 was this show. Let's go back to June 9th, just a couple weeks earlier. June 9th, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels had a legit fight in the locker room. The end result being a chunk of Michaels' hair being ripped out by Bret before the fight was broken up.
This was in Worcester, Massachusetts, correct?
I believe that is correct. The show that night was changed, doing 3 angles with Ken Shamrock to put him into the mix, as Shamrock would be put in Michaels' spot in the 10-man tag main event at the pay-per-view July 6th, the Canadian Stampede show we were just talking about. Shamrock would team with Sid, Steve Austin, and the Legion of Doom to take on Bret, Owen, Davey Boy Smith, Jim Neidhardt, and Brian Pillman. June 15th, so 6 days later, there was a terrible auto accident resulting in the following wrestlers being hospitalized. Psycho Sid, Doug Furnace, who suffered the most serious injuries, Phil LaFawn, and Flash Funk. Shawn Michaels, his attorney sent the WWF a letter saying that Michaels hadn't breached his contract, but that he was in fact injured in the fight with Bret Hart, claiming both knee and neck injuries, and that he would be unable to wrestle for 4 to 6 weeks. Hart wanted to do a live interview on the June 16th Raw to turn his fight into a wrestling angle and give his side of the situation in his typical semi-shooting work fashion. But for whatever reason, likely to avoid antagonizing Michaels, as Dave Meltzer put it. It was decided against using Hart on the live show for fear he might say something that Michaels would take the wrong way on a live interview.
Which is hilarious because Shawn Michaels' entire on-screen character and off-screen character at that point was saying things about Bret Hart that Bret Hart might take the wrong way and be offended by, yet the company was totally okay with that. But at that time, Vince McMahon was desperate to coddle Shawn Michaels no matter what he did. He did wrong always, yet could do no wrong.
The whole thing that the last straw that set off the fight was Shawn Michaels making the sunny days comment during a promo.
Yes.
And talking about how Bret Hart is a babyface, but you should see this guy on the road. He's no hero. That got him legit heat at home. Bret Hart got in trouble with the family. And so that's what kind of was the last straw. It was there was a lot of other things, but that was kind of the last straw that led to that physical altercation backstage at the June 9th show.
Well, this was also around the same time where Shawn Michaels had flat out told Bret Hart, yeah, it's great that you'll put me over, but I'll never put you over.
It was also said on television that both men were injured in the fight, citing Michaels' aforementioned injuries and mentioning that Hart re-aggravated his knee injury. So that's how we got into this tag title tournament situation that we're going to hear about later in this review.
So Bret and Shawn, were they the tag team champions?
Austin and Shawn Michaels are the tag team champions. Okay. So now Michaels, talking about his injury from this fight, says he's going to be gone for 4 to 6 weeks. So they now need to figure out what they're doing with the tag titles. Who's going to be Austin's partner? What are they doing with the main event? Because now Sid's been in a car accident, so he's going to get pulled out of it. And going into the pay-per-view, Goldust was put into the Sid spot. And they were actually going to move Sid to face Vader before the accident. And so now he's completely off the show. So all of this happened in the weeks leading up to this show here.
Quite the tumultuous time. We should also point out, as far as our wrestling consumption in 1997, I was primarily a WCW fan. I would flip over to Raw during commercials, but I very rarely, if ever, watched full episodes of Raw as they happened. I was always watching Nitro first, where I assume you were more of the WWF fan at that point? Or were you watching Raw primarily and then watching Nitro later, or were you kind of on the same plane as I was?
In June of 97, I was a watch WCW live guy.
Okay.
Tape the Raw on VHS in another room guy.
Oh, yeah.
So I had 2 TVs working, one for live Nitro, and the other one I would record Raw and go back and watch it. So that's how I consumed 1997. We see a recap of Paul Bearer hitting the Undertaker with the urn, turning on him. We see Taker burning Paul Bearer with a fireball. Undertaker was forced to take Paul Bearer back as his manager because Paul Bearer was blackmailing him, saying that he would share his unthinkable dark secret with the world. Last week, Undertaker snapped. Paul Bearer says he's had enough, and he is going to tell the world the secret this week. So, I don't know about you, Adam, but I've been calling it out since we started this podcast.
The first thing I thought of when I saw this open, I'm like, Jeremy is here for this. He is into the lore of Kane and the Undertaker.
It's the most awful and ridiculous story that spanned over 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah, it's not longer, because when Undertaker debuted, he was called Kane the Undertaker. So if you really want to dig into the lore, it goes all the way back to the debut of the Undertaker pre-television. And
they struggled maintaining the canon of this story.
Struggled is kind.
So I think it would be the funniest thing. I think it would be a real wrestle crap type of situation where if we got the entire oral history recap of the Kane and Undertaker story, because it makes no sense, that it would be hilarious to
It would be
actually
hilarious.
have.
I also think it would be a great challenge for podcasters to take on of trying to fill the logic gaps, trying to draw.
You don't even have to fill. You just have to point out like where the story took a hard right turn that was unexpected. Like
it's basically, if you recall, and people who aren't old like us won't, but it's basically an unintentional choose your own adventure book.
Sure, I loved those when I was a kid.
Hardcore about the choose your own adventure books. I remember there was a racing one. There was an Attack of the Killer Tomatoes choose your own.
There was nothing worse than you flip to the page and you had the spiral circle. And you're like, oh no, it died. Yeah, I love those books.
Yeah, so that's basically what Kane and the Undertaker was. We're going to get the explanation. In theory, it's all will be revealed tonight by Paul Bear. But first, the show starts. There is a little bit of pyro, and then every piece of poster board in Des Moines, Iowa was here in this arena. It is signs, and more signs. It's like a Tesla song here. Vince McMahon says, "You're looking at boisterous fans exercising their freedom of expression." And at this point, I'm thinking, oh my God, is he going to say WWE Universe next? This is so like weird WWE speak all the way back in 1997 WWF.
It's something that I'm glad has gone away. Like there's still signs at wrestling,
nothing,
but
like
there's
garbage,
there's not 90s level of signs at wrestling where
you can't see. Like 95% of what you see in this open is signs. And I never went to an episode of Raw back then, but I remember going to Nitros and it drove me insane. Like if you were a kid, you were screwed.
No, and there were signs everywhere. And this was both companies. This was just 90s wrestling, signs everywhere. I'm glad we've reined it in a bit.
I think it's the one good thing about everybody being on their cell phones now is that they don't have two free hands to hold up a sign.
So we get 3,781 fans with signs. So that's how many are in the building tonight.
It doesn't look particularly full. That we'll get to it throughout the show. To me, one of the most interesting aspects of this show is that you can tell this is a WWF that is not flush with money.
Nope.
And is losing the war. The lighting is weird from certain camera shots. There's a lot of empty seats in the upper deck when you see the ringside shots. Like the entrance area is fine, but it's not particularly elaborate. Even like there's a Tron, but the Nitro set looks so much cooler than this. Like this is a company that is trying to bust through and trying to get back to number one spot. But like, this is an era where like they owed money to creditors. You know, we've heard Dave Meltzer talk about before, like what turned things around was when they made the decision to start charging full price for the in your house pay-per-views, for the non-Big Four pay-per-views. When they started charging full price, more people ordered than when they were cut rate, whatever it was, $15 or $20. And that instantaneously somewhat solve their money problems. But here, they don't look like the industry leader visually.
3,781 fans in Des Moines, Iowa. Nitro on this same night, they're in the MGM Grand. They have 8,239 fans. Wow. So just a huge difference of where we are in the war. The fans paid at this Raw a gate of $69,180. So very rarely do you read a WWF, WWE gate that's under $100,000.
Yeah, and this is considerably under that.
Vince McMahon, Jerry the King Lawler, and Jim Ross are all on commentary. You've got... and Vince McMahon's your lead announcer.
Yes.
He's your lead play-by-play guy. Jerry Lawler, your lead color man, and JR is there as the third man in the booth.
JR is basically, it's such a weird time for him where he's almost in the Mike Tenay role, or in some ways the role that Tony Schiavone is on AEW in current day, where he's not the color guy, he's not the play-by-play guy, he's something in between trying to get stuff over. It's also strange to see Vince McMahon and hear Vince McMahon as the play-by-play guy this close to when when the whole screw job would happen and he would turn into the evil Mr. McMahon character. Here he's wearing a a black denim jacket, but he's still Vince McMahon. The ring apron says Raw is War on it, but then we've got the WWF New Generation logo still in the lower left corner of the screen. So it still is it's a transition period. We talked about the SummerSlam 96 pay-per-view that we reviewed where that felt really strange because everything visually still looked like the New Generation era, but they were trying to take baby steps to being more edgy, and it felt really visually off. Here we're closer to the Attitude Era, but it still has vestiges of what was before.
Ken Shamrock opens the show taking on the 1997 King of the Ring winner, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. He's accompanied by Chyna. We get a pre-tape promo from Triple H saying that he's bringing the world's most dangerous woman with him to this match. Shamrock will be in that 10-man tag at the Calgary Stampede. Hunter starts out by getting the advantage. He pokes Shamrock in the eye to get the advantage. Helmsley and Hebner are arguing with the referee because, and this leads to Earl Hebner pulling him off of the corner by his hair because he didn't like being pushed around by Helmsley. Jim Ross and I were on the same page when it came to officiating here, as he's like, this is a bit much from Earl Hebner.
And for Jim Ross to think a referee is doing too much,
yes,
that's pretty shocking. It was always surprising me to hear how far back it goes that the announcers can't call the referees or call them by their names. Here it's Earl Hebner, and Jim Ross is only allowed to call him the official. Also of note, Vince McMahon and particularly Jerry Lawler go out of their way to bury the UFC by name as they're talking about how Ken Shamrock is the world's most dangerous man, but he's never faced the level of competition that he is in the WWF. And it's just like, we're trying to get this guy over as the world's most dangerous man, and you're going to talk about the UFC and mention them by name. Why would you bury the level of competition of where he came from? It's not doing him any favors. He already doesn't look dangerous when he comes out in that beautiful, silky, smooth ring
full-length robe. Yeah.
Oh my God, it looked like the softest thing ever. But yeah, it's not surprising because it's what WWF does. They bury everyone else, but it wasn't particularly useful here.
What was not soft was the landing as Shamrock goes over the top rope, hits the floor. Chyna picks him up, throws him into the steps. And at this point, we see Mankind start to make his way down the ramp. Mick Foley, Mankind. And this distracts Helmsley. He turns around. Shamrock hits a belly-to-belly, gets the pin thanks to the distraction.
A distraction finish in the WWF. Who would have thought it on Monday Night Raw?
Mankind chases Helmsley away. They will meet at the pay-per-view in Calgary.
This was a nothing match. I think if you would have seen Triple H and Shamrock, just you see the lineup and think, oh, that could be a really good 1997. Nothing. It's also weird because it's Triple H. He's not coming out with a puffy shirt. He's out there with Chyna, but he still is coming out to his like Greenwich royalty weird music. It's again like so many things about the company. It's in a weird in between time for Triple H.
We see a video of Ahmed Johnson turning on the Undertaker to join the Nation of Domination.
Incorrect. He joined the new Nation of Domination. I think there was a fine jar, like a swear jar, but for if you didn't say new Nation of Domination here, you have to say it.
We then saw the Disciples of Apocalypse, the DOA. These biker dudes make their debut, jumping the Nation. It led to a 4-on-4 brawl. Ahmed Johnson got a knee injury legit in that fight. We go to the hospital and see him having his surgery. We talk about that in some more detail in our Season 1 recap of the Calgary Stampede show.
I was going to say, this is not the first time that we have seen and talked about in detail an Ahmed Johnson injury leading to him being gone, him being in the hospital, because we also had that episode of Raw, or the pay-per-view back in 96, where Farouk as the Ben-Hur Centurion-looking character managed by Sonny was supposed to wrestle Ahmed Johnson, but Ahmed's spleen exploded, and so he wasn't able to wrestle. Yes. So it's weird that we've barely seen Ahmed And almost every time we've seen him, he's been on a
He's
hospital bed.
and it's like a legit. There's those legit hospital surgery
Yes.
videos.
And he's like the biggest badass in wrestling, but he can't stay healthy. It's sad. But yeah, Disciples of Apocalypse with Crush, Brian Lee, and the Bruise Brothers, Ron and Don Harris, as an early version of the Biker Taker, basically.
New broadcast colleague Michael Cole is in the back with the Legion of Doom.
Is he ever? And he looks terrified of Hawk and Animal here.
If they win tonight, they will be in the finals of the tag team title opportunity tournament. We'll get to the tournament in more detail later. I do love every time the Legion of Doom drop a Road Warrior reference in their promos. Then we see a commercial for the SummerSlam $1 Million Chance contest.
I have no recollection of this. I remember the Monday Night Raw thing where many years later, Vince got rickrolled, but here I have no recollection of this.
I didn't either, so I looked it up. I will have more to say during the Sable appearance with the money. So we'll talk about what happened with the SummerSlam $1 Million Chance contest later in this podcast.
Here it's Sunny, and Vince refers to her as the Siren Queen herself. What?
This is
Queen, Sunny?
Yeah, she's Sunny is super talented. We've always talked about this is like peak Sunny here, 96, 97.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she looks like $1 million. She's got great personality, amazing performer. It's always sad her downfall and her demise.
Yeah, the trajectory. It's so sad because you go back and see her as Tammy Fitch on Smoky Mountain.
Sure.
And she's great. And then you see her here, and it's like she should be like in an era of like valets and women not as wrestlers. She should be the biggest female star in the company for years to come, and it does not work out.
Tag Team Championship Tournament semifinal. Okay, we have the Nation of Domination, the new Nation of Domination, taking on the Legion of Doom. Here we get brackets for this tournament. So the winner of this tournament will get a Tag Team Championship match against Stone Cold Steve Austin, who's one half of the Tag Team Champions, and his replacement for Shawn Michaels, because Shawn Michaels is hurt from the Bret Hart fight. So Shawn Michaels is out. Austin will be picking a new partner to defend the tag team titles against the winner of this tournament. So there's two stories going on for this show. The brackets. The first team I see on this bracket is Jerry the King Lawler and Rob Van Dam were a tag team? What is this?
Well, I think this is when they did the whole Jerry Lawler invades the ECW arena.
Yeah.
But it's like Rob Van Dam and Bill Alfonso and Sabu are on his side laying people out. But I have no recollection of Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lawler being a team in the WWF.
I have no memory of this either. It's incredible. In 1997, incredible. Yes. They lost to the Headbangers. The Bulldog and Owen Hart defeated the Blackjacks. The Nation defeated Undertaker and Vader. And the Legion of Doom defeated the Godwins.
Yeah, so Legion of Doom defeated the Godwins. We see a highlight of that.
Jesus.
And Henry Godwin, the former Shanghai Pierce, who we extolled the virtues of in a recent episode, I believe, on the bonus feed where he wrestled on WCW Saturday Night against Too Cold Scorpio. He broke his C4 vertebrae in his neck. That's legit. On, you guessed it, a doomsday device. Doing a doomsday device to a man that size has the potential to go off the rails, and it did. They show this in slow motion.
Oh, it was brutal.
Lord. It's as bad as the video they would show in slow motion over and over on ECW TV when they'd be, was it Extreme Warfare Volume 2 they'd be hyping, and they'd show in slow motion when Chris Benoit dropped Sabu right on his head and broke his neck. This is every bit as bad.
Match starts with Animal catching Farouk in a power slam. That's the first move of the match.
Yes.
Hawk hits a neck breaker on D'Lo. Farouk gets sent to the stairs. Animal power slams D'Lo. They go for the Doomsday device. This is like 45 seconds into this match. They go for the Doomsday Device and hit it on D'Lo. But Kama, the future Godfather, the former Papa Shango, he's outside the ring with Animal. The ref is distracted by this. And one of the Godwins runs in, hits Hawk with the slop bucket. Farouk gets the pin, and the Nation of Domination advance in a 2-minute just waste of time.
Yeah, again, a total nothing match. Nothing like you'd remember the Road Warriors or Legion of Doom from before. Vince calls Kama Ben Mustafa once. I know they called him Kama Mustafa, but Kama Ben Mustafa, which was very strange. Like you said, not a whole lot at all to this match. It's so strange to see the LOD in this era of the WWF. You kind of forget they were doing this. They did the whole thing with Hawk falling off the Titantron, draws, all that. But here they're just the LOD.
Vince interviews Farouk after the match. Farouk, the Nation of Domination, talking about being discriminated against, says he wasn't chosen. Vader was chosen for the title shots because the Nation members are black. Vince, king of the segue. Vince McMahon says,
in all caps, amazing.
Let's talk about another white man. What about Crush?
The most incredible commentary line or interview line, I think, in any show we've ever watched. Quote, let's talk about another white man. Crush. Unbelievable. I also have to mention, if we're talking Vince McMahon, just going back to this match, there's a point where like promoter Vince McMahon, Booker Vince McMahon comes out. D'Lo telegraphs a backdrop worse than anything I've ever seen in professional wrestling. He throws his man into the corner and then just drops and waits and waits and waits. And Vince yells at the top of his lungs, "Oh, come on!" before Hawk hits the neck breaker. I howled.
Savio Vega interrupts this. He says that he quit the Nation and he's here for revenge. Savio's buddies come out and they attack the Nation of Domination 4-on-3. Referees separate them, and then the DOA come out on their motorcycles. They surround the ring. All three groups are fighting each other. This ended up looking like it looked bad in certain spots, but anytime the cops actually come in to break it up, that does look like it's getting out of control. So that always looks good. But these groups were just these groups just I don't know what it was about the Savio's group. We'll be told they're Los Boricuas later. It was like nobody wanted to sell for each other.
No.
And so it was just like a giant schmoz.
Well, it wasn't even like a fun no one wants to sell for each other where it's just big, scary dudes wild throwing at each other and nobody selling. Nobody looked particularly intimidating, which isn't good when it's 4-on-4 gang wars. This didn't work for me. This DOA, New Nation of Domination, Los Boricuas 3-way battle. But yeah, this is the debut of the men we'll see later as the Boricuas wearing all white.
Yeah, after commercial, Michael Cole was interviewing Savio Vega. That's where he officially introduces the team. We're big Miguel Perez fans on this podcast, yes. That's for sure. So he's a member of the Boricuas. We then get a look at the Sunny bikini shoot for WWF Magazine, and there are exclusive pics of Brian Pillman spending alone time with Sunny in the magazine.
Yeah, I have a very, very vague memory of that, of them starting to go that direction. I don't think anything ever became of it.
No, it never did anything.
Well, then a few short months later, obviously the tragic passing of Brian Pillman, but it was one of those weird, like, everything about Brian Pillman and the WWF is a what-if moment. We'll get to that later. We see backstage a stressed out Undertaker in his dark locker room as he waits for his secret to be revealed. We come back from commercial. We hear some very wacky synth music. Jeremy, I texted you a couple days ago and said, you will never guess what man wrestled on the episode of WCW Thunder that we just reviewed last week if you're listening in linear fashion, and here on this episode of Monday Nitro. They took place 1 year apart. Who do we see come through the curtain? A very oiled up, light heavyweight Scott Pudski.
Scott, we're becoming a Scott Putski podcast now. Back-to-back
Unbelievable.
weeks of
What
Scott Putski.
such a bit part in this era of both WWF and WCW, and somehow in back-to-back weeks, he ends up on shows that we review. He is taking on Brian Christopher, but not before we see video highlights of Ivan Putski in 1990 on a 1997 WWF broadcast.
Yeah, they're showing us old clips of Ivan Putski throwing Polish hammers around, and this is wacky. And Scott Putski, this guy looks nothing like the guy a year later. This guy is like, it looked like he had to diet down to hit this light heavyweight status, and he is shredded. He's in phenomenal shape here.
He looks like a guy who cut 40 pounds for a UFC fight and then nearly dies as he walks off the scale, but just much more oily here for Scott Putski. He is taking on Brian Christopher in a match that is the living, breathing embodiment of how much of a failure the WWF light heavyweight division was as an alternative to WCW's cruiserweight division. We had that brief window, which lasted on Canadian Stampede, and the next night when they had a rematch, when it was Taka Michinoku and the Great Sasuke. Incredible matches, incredible wrestlers. The only time that the light heavyweight division or the WWF cruiserweight division years later would ever feel like WCW's cruiserweight division. Here instead, it's two small, muscled up guys doing the exact same type of match everyone else did on the card, except for they're smaller. I have no thoughts about this match except for Brian Christopher inventing the Miz's skull-crushing finale.
Yeah, the gag here is that Jerry Lawler won't confirm or deny that he's actually Brian Christopher's father.
Yes.
So they showed this video package of Ivan Putski throwing Polish hammers, and then when Brian Christopher comes out, they roll a video package of Jerry Lawler throwing pile drivers, and he's like, "Well, what does this have anything to do with anything? I don't know why you're trying." So that was good. So the great Sasuke will be at the pay-per-view, as Jim Ross said.
Jim Ross, bless his heart, and he was great back then, and he tried so hard to get these guys over a broadcast and with fellow broadcasters who did not want these guys to get over. But his pronunciations of the great Sasuke and Taka Michinoku, he was incapable of saying Michinoku, bless his heart. But yes, he tries to hype up that we will see later on highlights of the incredible great Sasuke, or the great Sasuke as we know him. Yeah,
so after Brian Christopher wins with the skull-crushing finale, he does a drop kick off the middle rope to the back of the head. Putski does some offense, and it was not as boring as his 1998 offense was. His offense in 98, horrendous. Here, not as boring. Still boring.
Well, it's also much more acceptable seeing Scott Putski get offense on Brian Christopher than it is seeing Scott Putski get offense on newly flockless, pushed Saturn, having to sell for eons, it felt like, for Scott Putski.
After a distraction by Lawler, Brian Christopher gets the pin, and the Lawlers double team Scott Putski with a spike pile driver. And I guess that they were building to a father and son tag team match. I don't know if it ever happened. I did not look it up.
I don't know if Brian Christopher was able to push Rob Van Dam out of that tag team with his dad and get that spot.
After this, Jerry Lawler cuts a promo, and Jerry Lawler, good promo.
Yes.
Brian Christopher gets handed the microphone, and he cuts a promo after Jerry Lawler cut a promo. And Brian Christopher is a horrible promo. This was awful, and it's extra awful when it has to follow a good Jerry Lawler promo.
Yeah, it's the best way to describe Brian Christopher promos are... It's if Buff Bagwell drank 3 liters of Mountain Dew immediately and then cut a promo. So yeah, not great. We see some footage from the Stone Cold Said So video of Austin and ECW impersonating Hulk Hogan.
You get a Hulk Hogan reference.
Yes, the announcers get a good laugh at that. We then get a terrible long-winded, never-ending, backstage, dimly lit locker room promo of The Undertaker saying you're going to hear a biased version of the worst night of his life. He's talking like a normal person in normal clothes. He asks that people give him a chance to tell his side later, and we'll get an even longer, more rambling, worse promo from The Undertaker after the pallbearer story.
We get a great Sasuke video package, including a clip that included a no-rope barbed wire match on WWF TV.
Yeah,
wow, I was not expecting that.
It was very interesting that they didn't just show high-flying stuff from him, but they showed explosions and barbed wire, some insanity from the great Sasuke. We go to the ring. Brian Pillman is in the ring. Vince McMahon says that Brian Pillman beat up a fan last week on Shotgun Saturday Night and has been fired. Yet
yes.
He's here wrestling. So I'm going to need further explanation. We'll see if we get it later on.
We don't. I stopped the show because I also needed, because I had to go look this up. I had it in my notes as a point to follow up. What does that mean? And and so I went back and looked. So apparently he was fired as the commentator on Shotgun Saturday Night.
I see.
So he was doing commentary
as a wrestler.
As a wrestler, he's just no longer doing commentary on Shotgun Saturday Night because he was brought in as a commentator after the automobile accident that shattered his ankle. So we get a promo from Pillman in the back. He apologizes. He apologizes for being the voice of reason. He doesn't apologize for how he's going to be biting Mankind's ear tonight. Pillman's in the ring. His opponent is Mankind, who comes out wearing a sign around his neck that says, "Pick me, Steve." He wants to be Steve Austin's tag team partner. Mankind brings JR a gift. It's a hand with a mandible claw on it. This was an apology gift for the super famous, incredibly well done sit-down interview segment with Jim Ross and Mankind, where you got into the Mick Foley backstory, and it really was one of the best things WWF has produced. And at the end of that, it ends up with Foley attacking Jim Ross, and Jim Ross says it's okay, we're cool, and this was his gift as a I'm sorry gift.
If we're also ranking prosthetic hand-based angles or stories in the WWF, this is much better than Mark Henry, Mae Young, and the hand.
Pillman jumps Mankind from behind. In the ring, Mankind gets the advantage, hits a running knee in the corner to a seated Brian Pillman. And then we get an Austin inset promo where he basically just says, "Mankind sucks. I don't want him to be my partner."
That's pretty much exactly what it is. This crowd is dead, which is a hallmark for almost this entire show. It's not mic'd well, but it's also they don't care about any of these people until we see Steve Austin later, which is sad given that it's Mankind and Brian Pillman. It's also noteworthy, though. You want to talk about sad? Seeing Brian Pillman out here, he's wearing his Four Horsemen gear. He's looking like Brian Pillman, but he can't walk. He should not be wrestling.
No.
I mean, his ankle was destroyed, and it's so sad because he was such a dynamic, kinetic performer in the ring, and here there's none of that. It's sad to watch.
No, and again, it's another one of those matches on paper. You look at the lineup, you're like, this is going to be great. And then you're like, and it was another nothing match. Chyna and Helmsley are on the stage watching. Mankind, with a baseball slide, knocks Pillman outside. Pillman on the outside hits Mankind with the ring bell. And then Pillman posts Mankind. Pillman starts working over the good ear. Remember, Mankind lost his ear in a match with Vader. Pillman's working over the good ear. He goes to stab Mankind with a pencil, but the referee stops it.
Great. He grabs a pencil from the announce desk and goes to stab Mankind in his good ear with the pencil. We at least get some fun Brian Pillman loose cannon stuff, but it's just sad because, again, just his body won't let him deliver in the ring.
Mankind charges in. Pillman moves, and Mankind goes shoulder first hard into the steps. Oof. I mean, this is classic Mick Foley taking excruciating bumps. In the ring, Pillman is biting the ear, and this is a callback to the Mike Tyson. It was such a huge moment in the Evander Holyfield fight. Like, that was pop culture moment, so it was going to be everywhere, including here.
It's a pop culture touchstone. You'd hear it referenced on Nitro. I think on one of the previous Nitro episodes, we talked about it being referenced several times, I think, by Roddy Piper. It's referenced here. This is just, again, everything we're saying and the guys that are involved, even with Pillman not being able to go, you would think the crowd would be into this, but it's just crickets. It's just occurring. They're in the building, but they're not reacting.
No, Mankind goes to work on Pillman's bad ankle, wraps it around the post. He goes to whip him into the ropes, but the ankle gives out and Pillman just crumbles to the ground. Mankind goes for the mandible claw, but Hunter jumps on the apron. Mankind goes after Hunter, puts the mandible claw on him on the outside. Pillman jumps Mankind from behind, hitting him with his boot. Helmsley tries to hit Mankind with a chair, but Mankind moves, and Helmsley accidentally hits Pillman.
This chair shot, it is a big padded chair that Triple H softly hits Brian Pillman with. I'm not complaining. We've seen terrifying chair shots from this era, but it was amusing because this did not look painful.
Mankind chases Helmsley away, and Pillman sneaks into the ring just before the 10 count and gets a count-out victory. Hour 2 of the show begins with more indoor pyro, a much better pyro display than we opened the show with.
Hour 1 ends, we have credits, and then there's more pyro, and Hour 2 starts like it's a separate show. I know they would do Raw and Warzone listed separately to have them separately in the ratings, but I had forgotten how much they would actually separate it out to where it felt like the end of one show, the beginning of another show. And this part of the show will open up next with Paul Bearer spilling the beans.
He came out to no music.
Yeah, well, he comes out to no music. And before that, we get the Raw open again. It's the same open, the same video open of everyone brawling in the warehouse. We have that twice. And yes, Paul Bearer comes out with he comes out with no music. An obviously planted fan, a goth creature of the night girl, tries to tackle Paul Bearer as he's walking up to the ring to stop him from telling the Undertaker's deep dark secret. But
it's
Paul Bearer,
so weird that they had that they had a woman do that and not like a crazed Undertaker fan.
The idea was she was a crazed Undertaker fan. She was a crazed goth girl. I mean, maybe Undertaker was all over Tiger Beat in 1997. I don't know. That wasn't the part of the magazine I was checking out then.
Oh no, they try to this was the work shoot era here, so they're trying to make it seem like it was a real fan that took him down.
And of course, Vince like, oh no, let her go, because Vince has got to make himself look like the good guy. But yeah, this okay on paper, but did not work out very well. He gets in the ring, and it's so weird because it's Paul Bearer, but he does not have the dyed black hair. He's got
he's Percy Pringle,
blondish brown, so he looks like Percy Pringle, but he's talking like Paul Bearer. This is terrible, but there are some amazing lines here, including this long explanation from Paul Bearer where he says, direct quote, "The Undertaker's father was a mortician of excellence." He was a mortician of excellence. So does this mean that the Undertaker's father was like the Bret Hart of morticians?
Of morticianing, yeah. Oh yeah.
This is incredible.
So I'm going to try to recap this quickly. This promo was not quick, but I will try to recap it quickly. 20 years ago, the family-owned funeral home, there were two little kids there, a red-headed punk, that's the Undertaker, and the second kid was a sweet kid named Kane. Paul was an apprentice at this funeral home. The Undertaker's father was an exceptional mortician. The Undertaker, as a kid, had, quote, the look of the devil.
He was the devil's seed.
He was the devil's seed. He was Kane's hero. Taker and Kane, the brothers, would smoke cigarettes behind the garage. They would steal chemicals from the funeral home.
Play with chemicals was the exact quote. Play with chemicals.
When Paul Bearer came to work, he saw a fire. Someone had burned down the funeral home, and he saw the Undertaker was in the bushes. He burned the funeral home to the ground, killing his parents. He screams, "You killed your family," and he calls him a murderer.
Undertaker! I know it! I've had this secret on my inside all my life. 20 years! You killed him! Undertaker! You are a murderer! You are a murderer, Undertaker! You're a goddamn murderer!
This is terrible, but his delivery as we get to the end of this with him saying, "You're a murderer, you're a goddamn murderer," was tremendous. I'll get to my thoughts overall on this lore when we get to what the Undertaker has to say later. We do get thunderstorm sounds and flickering lights as we go to commercial. We come back for the break and we see Paul Bearer and Vader calmly talking. And then we go to Mark Miro, Sable, and the Coffin of Cash.
Okay, so we get the Coffin of Cash here. This is part of the SummerSlam $1 million giveaway, okay? Today's clue is the key, okay? Here's what happened and why we never heard about this contest. I had to turn to R.D. Reynolds from WrestleCrap.com.
That's when you know things are going to get good, when we dig into WrestleCrap to explain something that's on the show.
So the article starts, and the winner is ... no one. That's right. No one won a damn thing. The catch was that this was a chance to win $1 million. It was a 1 in 100 chance, technically, to win $1 million.
Carney's gonna carney.
So all the contestants went and picked their number, and they all came away empty-handed. And the WWF had someone on hand who opened the chest to show that it would in fact unlock. There was one that was correct. It was the key behind number 3, and voila, the chest opened up and we saw the riches inside, but none of the contestants who won the contest were able to open it, so nobody won the prize. Another highlight of this was that they had like 3 or 4 people. They decided to add 2 more people to get the chance to do it. And so they called people during the pay-per-view, during SummerSlam. And a bunch of people weren't home and didn't answer the phone. And then, like, one that did was not watching SummerSlam.
I have a vague memory of this, actually. I remember it just being super embarrassing, and it also in some ways felt like the lowest point of the WWF losing the war era, where they couldn't even give this money away. Nobody was answering the phone. People that did weren't even watching the show.
Yeah, so and so the people that did try to win it all left empty-handed. No one won the $1 million.
Amazing.
Back to the show. WWF Tag Team Tournament match. It's the Intercontinental Champion Owen Hart teaming with the European Champion, the British Bulldog, to take on the Headbangers. No entrance for the Headbangers. They're already in the ring. The Headbangers are in control to start the match. Owen blind tags in and cuts off Thrasher. Double team by the Bulldog and Owen.
Very impressed by your ability to tell Mosh and Thrasher apart. They are my version of the Naturals, how you can never tell which one is Chase Stevens and which one is Andy Douglas. I am going to be 42 years old, and I have never learned which one is which of the Headbangers, and I don't plan on it.
So the highlight of this is Bret Hart phoning in from Calgary. He calls in.
He tries to phone in. A couple times it doesn't work. Vince is kind of ragging on the call for not happening. Also, by the way, There's nothing that happens in this match at all. It's such an example of how Owen Hart's talents were wasted in this company during this time. It just exists as a backdrop for Bret Hart to call in and talk about Steve Austin.
Yeah, he calls in. He says he's not afraid of Austin, and then he calls their opponents scoundrels, which I loved.
He says, Canadian fans will speak for the rest of the world on Sunday. They know American fans love this maggot, this living scum, Steve Austin. Bret is great here. He is very clear in saying that he is calling from Calgary and that he is not in the building tonight. At this point, I'm so disappointed. This show has not had any of the electricity of the Raw going back and forth between the States and Canada that I remember it having when I would tune into Raw back then.
Mosh runs wild in the ring. Bulldog trips Thrasher off the top. Owen rolls up Mosh, gets a victory. And right after they get the win, Jim Cornette interrupts their victory.
He does. No crowd reaction for anything in this match, by the way. Before Jim Cornette interrupts, he's on the stage. He blows a whistle. And who comes out? But the Headhunters.
Again, I have no memory of this. Like, holy cow, the Headhunters came out.
No reaction.
No. And they're... none of the announcers tell us who these guys are or anything about what's happening. But the Headhunters hit the ring. Bulldog slams one of them, immediately like showing you that he should not slam these giant dudes. Like,
that feels like something that would be built to these short but huge, wide, round, scary dudes. And they immediately, the thing that would be the pop happens within the first 10 seconds of them getting in the ring.
They're beating up the headbangers. The Headhunters are beating up the headbangers. And one goes to the top rope. Because the Headhunters' big thing is they're big dudes that come off the top rope.
Yes.
And one goes to the top rope, but the Headbangers cut him off. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And there's a whole bunch of miscommunication in the corner here. And it's a mess. Cornette finally gets in the ring to do a distraction here. And now he gets in a position where one of the Headhunters can go back to the top and hit a diving headbutt. The other one goes to the top and hits the moonsault off the top.
They just had no idea how to book monsters back then. And this was another example of it. We'll see that with Vader later on. This is terrible. When I watched this, what it felt like to me was like the Headhunters are coming out. It's like their debut. But backstage, Vince and everyone had already given up on this. And it was going to be a 1 or 2 week thing. Clearly, they were not behind the Headhunters because they did everything they could up until the end of this whole schmoz to undercut what should be their strengths.
And in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, they did mention that the Headhunters, this was their first time. They were having a tough time adjusting to the ring as well when they got in there because it was actual ropes and not the cables. And so it was a little bit of an adjustment for the big guys. Yeah.
Doing top rope stuff. When I see the Headhunters, what I always think is these are guys that came along 20 years too early. Yep. Not even because of the high flying, but because they were terrible wrestlers, but they were great gift wrestlers. These guys would have gotten over huge in the 2010s or 2020s just based off of gifts of them doing crazy high flying stuff, being short, fat dudes.
After commercial, the Undertaker in the locker room says, "It's true. His parents and his brother were burnt to death in the funeral home of their family. He was playing with matches, and he was playing with his brother Kane. They were punished. Undertaker went on his way to do his chores. He went chorin', and he looked back and saw Kane with flammable liquids. He knew what had happened. He ran back to the funeral home, but it was too late. Paul Bearer made him go to the morgue to see the burnt body of his mother, and then that's what changed the Undertaker forever, and he draws strength from the spirit of his dead parents and little brother, and he will strike down Paul Bearer."
This sucked.
Horrible.
I am
Nobody could have liked this in 1997 either. It's not like, oh, this is horrible for today. Like, no, this was no good then. Like, people did not like this. People liked Stone Cold Steve Austin. We'll see it in a little bit. Yes. They did not like this. Was not the hot stuff.
I agree with you in theory, but we live in a world where people think that the Fiend Bray Wyatt is profound. And so my thought watching this is that you cannot rag on the Fiend Bray Wyatt. And I preface this by saying, rag on him all you want. It's garbage. It is utter crap. But you cannot bag on that and rag on that without pointing out how horrible this whole thing with Paul Bearer and The Undertaker was. This is every bit as bad as the stupid modern Bray Wyatt stuff that we see now. This is trash. It's terribly written. It's terribly acted. If I had to see The Undertaker try to emote in a locker room about his mom, oh my God, just crap.
And people romanticize this now because this is what led to the Kane debut at the pay-per-view with Shawn Michaels and the Hell in a Cell that we recapped, I believe, in the bonus content. We covered that match in depth. So this was the story leading up to the return of his brother and blah, 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 blah. But it's all terrible. It's all terrible in execution. It might have resulted in like, hey, cool, a new character and a new thing, and it advanced some things, but like the road to get here, not good.
Exactly.
Not good.
The destination was great, but the road to it, horrendous. And I refuse to take seriously anyone who says this was good. I'm sorry. Not good.
The Honky Tonk Man. Now we've switched gears. This is how they got me back. They bring out the Honky Tonk Man.
Longtime personal friend. By far your favorite member of the Rhythm and Blues tag team.
By
the Honky
far.
Tonk Man.
He comes out leading his protege, Rockabilly, who's Billy Gunn, to the ring. As a Rockabilly cat myself for many, many, many years. Loved this act idea. And but wrong guy. Billy Gunn, not a Rockabilly cat. No. Honky Tonk Man. Never was going to be a good manager. So it wasn't a good mix.
He's too commanding of a character on his own. And then
he's an 80s cartoon character dropped into something that's like I'm about to watch a segment with Stone Cold Steve Austin after this. So like it's totally different.
It also just doesn't work because Billy Gunn as Rockabilly is just singles, shorter haircut Billy Gunn of Smoking Guns. He comes out in jeans.
Not even a pompadour. No pompadour.
There's
no sideburns.
Zero effort put into this Rockabilly character other than, oh, it's Billy Gunn. He's with Honky Tonk Man. Let's call him Rockabilly and end there.
Yeah. Horrible. His opponent is Vader with Paul Bearer. So this was quick. All that happened was Undertaker running in, beating up Vader as Paul Bearer grabs the microphone and he's yelling "murderer" over the house mic.
Which is great.
That was awesome.
It's like when you're kids and there's a fight and like a kid just yells a one-word insult over and over and over at another kid on the playground. That is Paul Bearer here.
Taker slaps Paul Bearer and Paul Bearer says, "It's true because Kane told me." And Undertaker stops in his tracks, finding out the news that his brother Kane is alive. Kane is alive. And Vader attacks Undertaker from behind, and Paul Bearer and Vader flee to end the segment.
The last part, that what you said, that's the worst part about this. Talked about earlier, not knowing how to book monsters. It's cowardly heel Vader running in fear up the ramp of The Undertaker. If this was on the bonus feed, I would use all of my words to describe exactly how this made me feel. But suffice to say, I was not happy.
The main event of this show, Jim the Anvil Neidhardt taking on one half of the WWF Tag Team Champions. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. And wow, you can see how hot Austin is getting with this crowd as he comes out. Place goes nuts. Anvil attacks him from behind, which is literally how every single match started on this show.
That's a good point.
Was someone attacking someone from behind every single time.
Everybody's on the Suzuki-gun jumpstart plan here for this match, for this entire show. Before, as Anvil's coming out, we see in a circle, Brian Pillman, Davey Boy Smith, and Owen Hart. They have a chair folded out. And there is the smallest television you have ever seen that these three men are trying to watch. There are iPhones that are larger than this screen.
Austin quickly gains the advantage via brawling, and Austin with a weird-looking Thez press, followed by right hands, and then he goes for a sharpshooter, but the Anvil fights out.
Anvil is totally shot already by this point. Like, you remember him going to WCW in 1998 and thinking he was done then. He looks terrible here. Like you said,
terrible.
He can't even take a Thez press. I have never seen Steve Austin mess up a Thez press, and here it looks horrendous, and it's all because of the Anvil.
Austin puts on an abdominal stretch using the ropes as a babyface in 97, which I thought was hilarious and awesome. They brawl on the outside. Austin slams Neidhardt on the floor. After a commercial, Bret Hitman Hart is in the building. He's not in Calgary, and he's attacking Ken Shamrock in the back. This was a super fun beatdown in the back. Hitman was giving it to Ken Shamrock. I loved it.
Yeah, this was tremendous, and they also did a great job on commentary telling us that Legion of Doom and Goldust left earlier, so Shamrock was Austin's only ally in the building, and he's been taken out. So now everyone, including the commentators, are waiting for the inevitable ambush by Bret Hart.
In the ring, Anvil misses a middle rope splash attempt. Anvil's awful. Austin is stomping Anvil in the corner. Bret Hart, he hits the ring, starts attacking Stone Cold. The rest of the Hart Foundation are... Well, the Hart Foundation classic of Hitman and Neidhardt are double teaming on Austin.
I enjoyed that brief 30 seconds of a return. It would have been nice if Jimmy Hart could have teleported in for like 30 seconds and then just disappeared immediately. You'll be shocked to know, by the way, as we talk about this beatdown, we did not get the great Jimmy Anvil Neidhardt standing dropkick in this match. That
because it wouldn't have been great.
Gone.
It would not have been great. It was awful.
Maybe made it to stomach level. He looked horrible here.
Bret puts a figure four on around the ring post. Mankind comes down to make the save. He puts the mandible claw on the Hitman.
Give me that match.
Yeah, the rest
and Bret Hart.
The rest of the Hart Foundation come down, they're hitting him with chairs, and I'm watching Pillman run down to the ring, and he is limping so horribly. It was like, it took me out of the whole thing. I'm like, oh my God, this guy is in no shape to be down here whatsoever. They beat down Mankind and Austin as the show goes off the air. These two had an uncooperative match because... but it wasn't like the good uncooperative matches we like. This was like just the Anvil being terrible.
This was not Inoki Masa Saito 1987, which we reviewed over on the bonus feed. This was Anvil being terrible and Austin doing his best to work around it, but there were clear limitations to that. As over as Austin was in his entrance, the crowd, like everything else on the show, was not really into the match. They livened up a bit for the beatdown at the end, but when you think about how red hot that pay-per-view was, particularly the 10-man tag, like you have in your mind that like, well, the go-home show, even if it wasn't in Canada, must have been insane, and the heat must have been nuclear. It was fairly tepid even during the beatdown at the end. This was not what I expected for a go-home show and the ending of a go-home show leading into a legendary pay-per-view.
Ratings for Nitro this night were a 3.3. They did a 3 for the first hour, a 3.6 second hour, a 5.9 share. This episode of Raw did a 2.48 rating, 2.28 for the first hour, 2.68 for the second hour, with a 4.29 share. Losing the night, Nash versus Rey Mysterio Jr. did a 3.5, while the WWF was peaking at the exact same time with the Undertaker response interview and the Vader Rockabilly match, which pulled in a 2.9. So,
yeah, it's crazy. This is that era of Nitro where almost anything they put out was going to beat, the best of what WWF could put on Raw. Like, yes, in hindsight, the idea of a Kevin Nash Rey Mysterio match is intriguing. That's not the most marquee thing they could put on. Granted, WWF, Austin Anvil isn't either, but they had this whole show-long story that had been building for several weeks of Undertaker and Paul Bearer. We're going to get the big reveal here, and while that was the peak in terms of the rating on the show, it didn't come anywhere near beating Nitro at that point. Like, Nitro was the clear leader of the two shows right now.
Favorite thing on this show?
Oh man, there's not a whole lot. Maybe the Brett beatdown of Ken Shamrock backstage.
That was
and
great.
The pop that Austin got coming out, but otherwise, it was a depressing show. Again,
nothing.
You know that afterwards they're going to have this great pay-per-view, but like, it's a small crowd. You can see the empty seats. There's not a lot of atmosphere. Nobody's into anything. The characters, for the most part, other than Austin and Brett, aren't over at all. And it just, you feel it's weird to watch a WWF show where they so clearly don't feel like the industry leader. I referenced that earlier, but it bears repeating. They felt like the second place team, and that's such a strange feeling watching one of their shows.
Yeah, I'm racking my brain to find anything else besides what you mentioned. But yeah, I think, honorable mention to Paul Bearer trying to do his best with crappy material. But man, it's bad. I think everything else on this show was not great. I think, I think getting to see the great Sasuke clips was another highlight for me as well, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. To me, just a very disappointing show. Again, being someone who would watch Nitro and then flip to Raw and see some of the segments with Austin and with Brett, with Austin and Vince during this time period. I was really excited when this came up on the randomizer, thinking, oh, cool, I'm going to get to watch a full Raw from this era that I'd seen bits and pieces of and heard how great it was. And this was, if that was a really hot time, which it was, this was an off week. Not a whole lot to really hang your hat on for this one.
Worst thing on this show? A lot to choose from.
There's a lot. Anvil's performance.
Oh, horrible. 10 minutes. That match was 10 minutes long. And it was terrible.
Anvil's performance, that really weird vignette of Triple H and not China driving up in a car to reveal
that was
the first
the
clue
key
for the key for the SummerSlam cash thing was really bad. But to me, it can't be anything other than the horrible, long-winded, lame lore that we got throughout this show from Paul Bearer and Undertaker. Despite Paul Bearer's delivery, this was terrible. None of it made me want to see a wrestling match whatsoever.
No, and all the wrestling was extremely short. It was all throwaway, and there was zero clean finishes on this show whatsoever.
Zero clean finishes, zero stakes, nothing exciting, nothing interesting. From in-ring perspective, this felt like a 25 years later evolution of the incredibly lame WWF stuff that we've talked about so much here and on the bonus feed. Just really uninspired in-ring work.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Now, we have reviewed better episodes of Raw in the past. Those episodes are available in the back catalog of the free feed that you're listening to this in right now. We also have the Canadian Stampede show that this was building to, like we mentioned at the top of the show. That's also back in season 1. It's available right now for free in your feed that you're listening to this right now. If you've listened to all of those, you're like, that's great and all, but I'm a regular listener. I've listened to all of those. Where can I get more content? Glad you asked. Over at our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. We have bonus episodes every single week. So you can go there and get another episode, both audio and video as well. Every single week we put out bonus content. We're over 100 episodes at the point of this recording, and you pay for the 1 month. It unlocks the entire back catalog of those episodes. So you've got over 100 episodes waiting for you in the back catalog of the Patreon. And we have other tiers of the Patreon. Not only can you support the show by listening to that bonus content, but you can also be the randomizer. We will take requests. You can be the intentionalizer. That's another option over there. So go check it out, patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, you can just push the subscribe button in your Apple Podcast feed right now, and it will unlock all of those episodes right now in your podcast feed that are marked bonus. Those will all unlock for you just by subscribing for 1 month. So go ahead and give that a try as well. And we mentioned video. Not only is this audio podcast available anywhere podcasts are found, but we are also on the YouTube channel at Patreon. No, not the Patreon. It's the YouTube channel is youtube.com/wrestlingatrandom podcast. So you can go there, give us a subscribe. Even if you're like, dude, I listen in my car. I'm not going to be watching you and Adam on video. That's fine. But you can support the show by going there, throwing a subscribe. Helps us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans can find the show. You can also support the show by telling your wrestling fan friends about the show. We need your help to spread the word. Wrestling fans know other wrestling fans, so please continue to spread the word. We're growing constantly. We'd love to see it. We're following along, so and it's all because a testament to you, the listeners of this podcast. So a big thank you for me. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. I don't feel like I have any other thank yous, though. This was a bit of a letdown for the randomizer. It happens. We'll see what happens next week.
And with that, we're calling it a podcast. Again, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.